is a 2022 Fulbright Scholar recipient and has held a New Zealand Health Research Council Sir Thomas Davis Te Patu Ki Te Rangi Ariki Fellowship in 2019 and New Zealand Health Research Council and Pasivika Postdoctoral Award 2016. Now, his work underpinned by the Pacific Post Development, the methodological framework which combines the Fijian Vanua research framework with the post-development theory to guide the ethical and the equitable use of Western developed and standardize and norm the symmetric measures among the Pacific people. Now, this has informed the use of brain function tests to assess the Kava users relative to productivity and driver safety. And we say now we're joined by Dr. Aporosa ni Bula Vanaka. Lovely to have your company.
Hey, Sambula here, brother. How are you?
Fantastic. It is great that you're here with us. And, we're just going to, just tell us and let our listeners aware now whereabouts in Fiji that you hail from.
Yeah, so for me, born here in Aotearoa, but my great-grandmother is from the village of Nanduri in Madawata, northern Fiji.
Vinaka. Well, just give us a brief overview of your research into the Kava, please, Apo.
So it kind of started back when I was in Fiji teaching at Richmond Methodist High School a number of years ago. Just recognized that this thing that had always been part of our life, that there was a lot of misunderstandings in relation to it. So from there, I went on and started to research, how does Kava affect the brain and what is its health implications and that type of thing. And the incredible thing about all of this is that at the end of it, we've spent quite a bit of taxpayer money on all of this research to actually come back and say, what the Pacific people have been telling you for the last couple of 100 years is actually what the situation is. We know that Kava isn't like alcohol. It's not like marijuana. It's so safe that here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, it's actually regulated as a food of all things. So, there's unfortunately a lot of misunderstanding, but we're doing the research. We're demonstrating that what Pacific people have been saying for the last couple 100 years is correct,
Goya. No, thank you for that. Now that you mentioned it, now let's dive into the core, the history of Kava.
So what we know from ethnobotany, so that's essentially the DNA of plants, we know that Kava originated in a small area in northern Vanuatu, and that we also know that Kava is asexual, meaning that it needs to be humanly propagated. It doesn't have seeds or anything like that. So the whole idea right from the beginning is that this must be a plant of the gods or of God, because who was growing it before the first Pacific people turned up only a couple of thousand years ago? So right from this inception, there's this idea that Kava is this special thing. It's got mana in it, and then from there we know it has medicinal properties, and this sort of idea is growing from there.
Yes. Now, can you explain the role of Kava in facilitating relational connection and its cultural significance to Pasifika? Or should we say to each Pasifika?
Absolutely. That's a wonderful question, because I think this is something that people often fail to understand the significance of it. I've been in so many places where people have looked on at us sitting on the floor on mats around the talanoa, around the kumete, the Kava bowl, and having talanoa. But what the fixation tends to be is on that coffee-colored liquid in the bowl. And what people often fail to understand is that the Kava, as in the liquid, does nothing but facilitate relational connection. Okay, but as I said again, there's this fixation that we need to smash as much of that liquid in the bowl as what we can, when at the end of the day, whether this is done through ceremony or done informally, Kava does nothing but facilitate our relational connection. And that's the underpinning thing. So this is what drives our culture, whether it's so'otanga or, luluku or sivu or whatever.
Yes.
There's a formal way of it, of our relational connection, or us just sitting there having talanoa, drinking angana or kava, and that's what it does. It facilitates our relational connection.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Now, You mentioned about understanding and misunderstanding and misinformation. Now, how has the misunderstanding and misinformation surrounding Kava affected Pasifika cultural identity?
Yeah, man. It's doing two things, eh? In one sense, it's diluting our culture, and we know from research that those people who have a real strong sense of their identity and culture, we know that that improves educational achievement. We also know, true, that it gives you greater resilience to things like trauma. So on the one hand, to us as Pacific people, that as we're sort of moving away into other areas, engaging in alcohol, for instance, which we know has a lot of implication for the culture. So
Yes.
there's on one hand, but on the other hand, as other people, and I'm talking about non-Pacific people, or even some of our own people who are been living overseas for a while, maybe aren't so connected back to the vanua or the whenua or the whanua or whatever, as they're moving away, they're also taking Kava into a new direction and using it in ways that Kava was never supposed to be used. Eh? So we think
Right.
about, I was saying before, that Kava is this thing that, it facilitates relational connection. We have increasing numbers of people now drinking Kava in solo sessions, right? Mixing it in shakers, giving it a bit of a nudge before bed or whatever. That's actually not what Kava is. And some researchers would say that that form of Kava is not technically Kava as it's supposed to be.
So it's
So this is
almost
kind
it's
of
almost you're saying it's like taking the mana off, eh? So it's actually been interpreted so many ways in their own, but that wasn't the actual what it was meant for, as you mentioned, because like it's almost missing one part of the mana of the cover has gone because of that.
absolutely. So if we go back to what is the foundational role of Kava
Exactly.
is relational
Yes.
connection, eh?
Yes.
We're taking this other thing out. Now, we've challenged some of these people who have done that, who are now like adding flavors. Actually, let's touch on the old flavors, eh? We've been drinking Kava in the Pacific for a couple of thousand years. Nobody ever added flavors to it. But now we've got a group of people who are adding flavors and they're stretching that even further. They're creating vapes. They're making these plastic shakers. They're making
Wow.
Kava
Right.
mixing machines. Essentially, what it's doing is it's dragging the culture in a direction that was never intended, and it's also corrupting the culture. And some of those people are saying, "Oh, all we're doing is we're just trying to, bring the Kava culture into a contemporary setting." Why do we need to do that?
Mm.
Why can't we stick with what Kava was originally for relational connection? And 2,000 years of no flavors and all the rest of it, I think, is a pretty good legacy, that we don't need these new things that are these gimmicks. Here's where I'd want to go to with all of this. Say, I think if we're honest, these things are simply being done to make money. It's not really about the culture. Some of these people will virtue signal. They'll say things like, "Oh, the culture is really important. However, have this drink here. It's got flavors in it. It's now in a can or whatever." Eh? It's all about making money. They're using our culture to make money off, and a lot of that money is not ever going back to the culture either. So, those are the problems that we're seeing coming out of this.
Thank you for that. Now, what role does the commercialization of cover playing in moving away from the intended purpose and culture around cover?
Mm. Well, as I was saying, just a second ago, in one way, it's corrupting our culture and it's perverting our culture, and it's also weakening our identity, particularly with Kava as being this cultural icon that underpins our identity. It contributes to our relational connection, fulfills our cultural practices. So it's doing all of those things. It's taking away what we've got left. And sadly, too, is there's this idea that, well, we don't really need to drink Kava. Why don't we drink alcohol instead? And we know what alcohol does, socio-culturally. So, yeah, it's diluting who we are as Pacific people, eh?
Fantastic. Well, just to wrap up uh, our interview, it's been amazing learning something new every day, a little bit more. I think it's quite hard for myself because I've only seen it here, but it will be more authentic if I've seen it, knowing where in my motherland in Samoa, where it's grown and how it's done. I think we'll get another perspective, maybe. You know what I mean? It's more authentic
Mm,
if you know a little bit more when you're actually on the homeland, on the roots,
mm,
the whenua, as you mentioned very early from the beginning, and then maybe we'll get, for me, a clear understanding as well, because it's always something to learn about every day. But your final thoughts on the role of Kava bars play in perpetuating misinformation about Kava and cultural misappropriation, appropriation, I should say.
So if we even think about the first thing, Kava bar, the first thing that we think about Kava bar is some form of link to alcohol, and we know that Kava is not alcohol. However, I have people tell me all the time that, oh no, Kava is alcohol. We know it's not.
Right.
There are people though that are running these establishments who are doing a really good job. So you think about the Kava Lounge that Anau Mesui and Todd Henry are running in Auckland. It's an educational space. It's a place where you go into and you learn from people who genuinely know about Kava. Then you have the flip side of that. There's a lot of these Kava bar places that are open in the States, where they stand around and they yell out things like Bula, and then all drink Kava and they're mixing kratom and other things into it.
Oh,
It's it's dragging us away again from our culture and who we are. Some of these places in the States, they've got pole dances and flashing lights and loud music. That is not our culture. However, it's been sold to locals who are coming in who know no better as being our culture, which is not. Well, it's a cultural corruption.
Now, for many of our listeners and viewers who are watching and hearing this today, for more information, where can our kainga or our community to contact you and to find a little bit more, and you giving more information around this amazing project that you've been working on or research?
One of the things that they can do is if they go on to aporosa.net, there's a tab there with some teaching and what have you, and you can roll down there and find even information about the cultural importance of Kava, what it is in all of our language, our dominant languages, Bislama, Fijian, Tongan, Samoan. So there's information out there if people want to read it. But what my real suggestion would be, why not find some locals and go and sit down on the floor, on the mats, use the kumete, use the mbilo, the apu, the ipu, all the rest of it. Sit down and drink Kava and talanoa and relationally connect with people,
Vinaka Vakalevu, thank you, Dr. Aporosa, for joining us this very afternoon and to share your amazing research. And God bless you. And we'll look forward to more in future. We'll stay in touch.
Okay. Hey, happy Fiji language.